It's the off season of trolling, you could say. Tobias Harris having some words for Paul George, the back and forth. We're going to break it all right down here on Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome into Locked On 76ers. We're your host, 76ers beat writer Keith Pompey. I'm Kayla Santiago, sideline reporter for the Delaware Blue Coats. And thank you so much for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So Keith, Tobias Harris trolling a little bit on Twitter of Paul George comments. What do you make of all this, some off-season drama here between Toby and PG?
I don't think it was really directed towards PG. And the only reason why I'm going to say that is because, these guys are friends. In the beginning, I remember there was a point where people were trying to talk negatively to PG about Tobias, and he took up for him. And what I mean by friends is PG's personal bodyguard used to be Tobias's. He basically said, hey, you're coming to Philly, you get this guy. And I want this guy is going to work for you. And the Sixers hired him the whole nine. So I don't think it was directed for him. I think what Tobias did is PG opened up the door. Mm-hmm. And he said what he said in regards. They said, hey, we could have kept Tobias. And to me, that was a knock at the Sixers, like saying, okay, y'all went ahead and got Paul George. And the moment after they won the Super Bowl, the day they won the Super Bowl, you guys finished 4-27. So to me, it looked like he was throwing shade at Paul George, but how I know their relationship, and Paul George even said what he said, like, it's not a knock to Tobias. I think that was Tobias's way to throw shade at the 76ers for the fact that how bad they were, and he had a way better season. That's how I took it. But it was crazy. I mean, hey, it was a mic drop moment, right?
It was. It reminded me of back when Jimmy Butler went to the locker room and said, Tobias over me. Tobias probably thinking PG over me right now. And it's interesting because, listen, Paul George had a really bad year of the 76ers. Philadelphia had a bad year all around. PG didn't really do what he was expected to do. The fit with Joel Embiid didn't work of what we saw the limited time with them as well. But I think a lot of people forget, and fans too, just how much they wanted Tobias Harris out the door. And then Tobias Harris goes with the Pistons. They have a pretty decent playoff run in the first round. And all of a sudden it's, oh, okay, well, maybe people do miss Tobias coming back. It's so interesting because everybody wanted him out the door, Keith. Now people are saying after 1 year and limited time, PG, who? They don't want PG on this team anymore. Limited sample size, but it was definitely an interesting back and forth.
Yeah, it was interesting. But the thing is, like, will Tobias get the last laugh, right? I mean, what is it? We'll figure out. Tobias has another year left on his contract with Detroit. The way he's playing, he'll probably remain in the league after that. Paul George has 3 years left. So it's going to be one of those things where we'll figure it out. But, you look at the numbers. Paul George had one of his worst seasons. Tobias, from a point standpoint, it was one of his lowest points per game standpoint. But he shot the ball well. And also he became the leader. He became the leader of that team, the vocal leader. So he had an input, and he will go down as a guy who helped them have but the biggest turnaround in NBA history. So Tobias is winning right now, but it's kind of like, let's say it's a mile race. He won the first 400 meters. Let's see what happens next year at the halfway point and then a couple of years from now. But, yeah, it's crazy. But, you know what? I've been waiting for Tobias to come back and do the mic drop. You know what I mean? You just have. And,
I love it.
yeah, it's great. It's great.
I think too, Tobias showed that a different side of him, right, in this playoffs. And this is something that we talked about when they were in it. Tobias being in the huddle, directing guys, talking to guys, telling them where to go. We didn't see as much of that with the 76ers, or when he tried to, maybe he didn't have the best performance overall. But at the same time, you saw a different side of Tobias Harris. So as soon as that gets put out, Tobias does have something to say about Paul George. For me, when I look at the Sixers, I'm hoping that Paul George has the last laugh, because you put a lot of money into this. You're putting a lot of promise. You have a top 3 pick coming up in the NBA draft. Paul George has to be the last laugh, because expectations, yes, Tobias Harris got a lot of money, and there's a lot of people in this league that get max contracts that probably do not deserve it. But to me, Keith, at this point, Paul George has much higher expectations than Tobias Harris did in his role.
Yes and no. I think, yeah, because of his role. But when you talk to Paul George, they brought him in here to be the third option. That's the same as what Tobias was, right? But yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think when we talk about Tobias Harris's contract, I think, it's a matter of the 76ers had to pay Tobias. And the reason why they had to pay him is because they gave up so much to acquire him. They didn't know if they were going to keep Jimmy Butler or not. So all of a sudden, if Jimmy walks and Jimmy says what he says, you kept Tobias over me, Jimmy knows that's not true. It was Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons didn't want to play with Jimmy Butler no more, right? So they made that decision. So the deal is, or I shouldn't say he didn't want to play with him. He wanted to have the ball in his hands. He wanted to do this. He wanted all that, right? So the thing is, if Tobias would have walked and the Sixers gave up Landry Shamet, they gave up all those draft picks, and one of the teams that Tobias was considering was the Clippers to go back there and other things, it would have been a bad look for the 76ers. So I feel like Tobias was in the right situation at the right time, which led him to getting paid, right? So yeah, there's higher. I mean, so with Paul George being the top free agent, there was like the expectations. I will say, yeah, in a way he was supposed to lead you to a championship, whereas Tobias was looked upon as a championship piece, but not a guy that's going to lead you to it. I mean, I guess what you say, I would agree with it when you think of it that way. But at the same time, I don't think Paul George was coming in here thinking that he was going to be the man. He thought that he was going to be a co-star. So when you look at that, you say to yourself, the Sixers paid a guy $211.5 million to be a co-star, to not be the alpha, but to be a secondary option, a guy who can help out from time to time. That's a lot of money for that. A lot.
And to be the 3 on the big 3 too, when you're looking at in terms of scoring options, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George being that third scoring option. And 2, when you look at Paul George's situation, we talk about having this last laugh. You also put into perspective that the 76ers have this coming year to really turn this around, right? Daryl Morey has this year to figure out if he's going to keep his job or not. What's going to happen with Joel Embiid? What's going to happen even with the health of Paul George as well? So there's also a lot lying on Paul George at this moment going into next year. And it is just so interesting, the back and forth, as you alluded to. The guys respect each other, but a little bit of off-season drama never left the 76ers, and they just had to reel it back in a little bit when things are going well from their end, getting number 3 pick and everything in between as well. So the back and forth by Paul George, I'm hoping for Philadelphia that Paul George gets the last laugh, because they're going to need it next season in a year where a lot is depending on the health and success of Joel Embiid, Paul George, or Daryl Morey as well. So people might lose their jobs if they don't do well next year. So we'll wait and see. But Tobias Harris, Paul George, let us know what you guys think in the comments about the back and forth. I'm curious, any fans too, comment if you actually miss Tobias Harris, because we know a lot of you guys were trying to push him out the door, and all of a sudden now you're saying, oh, Tobias Harris, Paul George. Let us know in the comments how you are currently feeling. And one thing we do know is 76ers are not in the playoffs, but the playoffs are heating up the Pacers, the Knicks in the Eastern Conference, and then, of course, on the other side, the Timberwolves and OKC. We will touch on that a little bit in lessons we have learned that implement the 76ers when we come back on the other side, right here on Locked On 76ers. And NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing you the heat with a slam dunk deal for DashPass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, DashPass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order for $20 or more. Use code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms do apply. What's your go-to move after an epic game? Are you ordering wings and reliving the highlights? Imagine being rewarded with free food just because someone went off for 50. I know I love free food anytime I can get it, so I know you will too. Ever looked at your delivery fees and thought, there's got to be a better way? With DashPass, you get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. How much would you save over a season? So here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long when any player scores 50 plus or more in a playoff game. DashPass members can get a free piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20+ order and code Wingstop50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms do apply. Make sure you go check it out today. So biggest lessons from the playoff, Keith, the biggest thing that I look at in this playoff run for these teams is just the way these rosters can go deep, way guys can step up, how they're constructed, in addition to just playing hard and playing fast. The 76ers are going to have a lot to compete with if they want to get where they want to in the Eastern Conference, because when you look at the Pacers in particular and OKC, they got it right. They're playing well. They're going deep into their rosters, especially the Thunder. It's crazy. Everybody able to get out there. And that's something that you take and you kind of, if you're any really other NBA team, but especially Philadelphia, looking at how you want to construct that roster to prepare you for next season.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing right there. I mean, here's the thing. When you look at the 76ers and you look at how they constructed it and you look at, OKC, let's just talk about OKC for a moment. They basically did the same thing that the Sixers did in regards to they had a multi-year tank. They acquired people. They used their cap space to acquire players, to take on salary in exchange for draft picks, right? But when you look at it, they got it right. They basically, they said to the Clippers, okay, if you want to give us SGA, go ahead, but we're going to need some picks too. And Clippers did it, right? And that goes in line with the Tobias trade because they used what they got for Tobias and gave it to OKC. Well, then next thing you know, they go out and they get Chet Holmgren. Or then they get the Jalen Williams, both of them, right? And now you look at it and you say to yourself, then other guys who were waived and things like that. So you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, well, there's no way that they're going to be able to keep all these guys because they're all going to be up for contracts. Well, when you look at it, to be honest with you, Chet Holmgren is heading into the final year of his deal. Jalen Williams is heading into the final year of his deal, but then they become restricted free agents the year afterwards, right? Well, at that point is when Lou Dort comes off the books.
Right.
And that's when Harkenstein comes off the books. But they're going to have so much cap space available. And they're going to have these bird rights. So then the following year after that is when you have to pay Shea. So it's kind of like staggered where guys are coming off the books and then other guys you're going to have to pay them. And I think that they're set up to have a dynasty because of the way they did it. Now, the reason why it works is because where the Sixers went out there and drafted Nerlens Noel, and then drafted, Joel Embiid,
Mm-hmm.
and then drafted Jahlil Okafor, and then traded for like Nick Stauskas. They had a lot of, then, they also got Dario Saric. So they did all these things where they made a lot of misses. Well, these people got it right. And I'm here to tell you, Jalen Williams is making $4.7 million. I wish I was making 4.7, but he's
Right.
only making $4.7 million this year for NBA terms, which is a bargain. Next year, he's going to make $6 million. So you're looking at this like, wow, you mean to tell me you got a third team all NBA guy who is who's in addition to that, like, who's like a second team all defensive, right? All-star, all that. When you look at all that, you're saying to yourself, this is ridiculous how right they got it done. And then you look at Indiana Pacers, the same thing. They're getting guys at bargains. They're getting dudes who other teams gave up on. It's just crazy. That's what the Sixers have to do. They got to make sure they get these things right. They have to.
And it's interesting, too, because it even comes down to this draft coming up. Now, granted, I don't think that there's a lot of ways you can go wrong in this draft if you stick with the number 3 pick, unless they're looking at trades, whatever that may be. But there's really 2 guys there that you look at, and one guy in particular to me, and Ace Bailey. If Harper, for some crazy reason, falls down to 3, which I don't believe he will, then you pick him. But that choice is fairly easy if you're looking at the top 3. In addition to that, not only are you looking at drafting these guys that you want to have potential, and we can go back and to the history books of the 76ers, early history, we could say drafting Markelle Fultz, getting up to get that pick. If you're going to draft these guys and you want to invest in them as well, you got to play them, and you also got to play them right. That all becomes a part of it, because we've touched on this before. The last thing you need is a number 3 pick coming in and not being implemented into the offense, not being implemented into the game plan. You not only have to get this pick right, you have to get this offseason right. You have to implement these guys right away to be able to bring this all together, because OKC, what I'm seeing right now is crazy. When you can go 9-10 deep into a playoff game and everybody can come in and make an impact, this team looks like they're unbeatable right now, especially in the Western Conference Finals. So the 76ers, I agree with you, Keith. They absolutely have to get it right. And there's a lot they have to get right over time going into this next season. That is a really big season for a lot of different people in that organization.
Well, and you also look at it right now when we talk about, getting it right and doing certain things. You look at the Indiana Pacers and you look at OKC. Both teams, they do go deep in the playoffs. Now, typically what they say is, you might play 9 to 10 guys in the regular season, right? The first round of playoffs, you may go 9 deep. The second round of the playoffs, we're probably going to go 7, right? And then, you could keep it there or what have you, because you got to give a couple guys a little bit of rest, and you may have situational guys. But these 2 teams, because they're so deep and they're young and they're athletic, whatever, they're changing the way that we look at the postseason. Right. Before, the postseason was like a strictly half-court game. You bring it in, you pound it in, you throw it back outside, what have you. Nah, they're changing the whole thing. They really are. And that's what it is. And, you look at it, both teams, they got a bunch of wings, something the Sixers need, and they're trying to do, but they have a bunch of two-way players too. Guys who, and the crazy part is you don't really give the Indiana Pacers a lot of credit for having these wing guys who can defend, but they're making Jalen Brunson work for all his points. So, this is what Nick Nurse wants, right? He wants these interchangeable guys who can just come in and drop and I'm gonna say drop knowledge, but just make a big impact on the game, doing a lot of different things and interchangeable parts, and that's what OKC and that's what the Pacers are doing. And here's something else, Kayla. These guys care about winning more than they do individual stats.
Exactly.
Key.
Yep.
You gotta have great players. You have great players who are great people.
And that's huge because when you can be unselfish and you can get everybody involved, that's how you win games. We've seen the 76ers not get everybody involved or people not wanting to get involved, and that has hurt them so much in the postseason, among a ton of other things as well. But we'll continue about the NBA playoffs in just a moment. And on the other side, I want to see how Joel Embiid fits into all of this when we come back right here on Locked On 76ers. So one thing I've been noticing about Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals, they play at their pace. They like to play quick. They like to run up and down the floor. And I wouldn't even say worried is the word, but when I look at the 76ers and, you know, let's say everything goes well, they get into the playoffs, everybody's healthy. The one thing that could hurt them to me when I'm looking at this Eastern Conference right now is the quickness of it, because yes, Joel Embiid is dominant. Yes, if he's 100% and not injured, he can be the best player on the floor. But Keith, he does slow the game down for the 76ers. They play a lot quicker with him off the floor. Is that any cause for concern when you look at right now how the Eastern Conference and the NBA playoffs is being played, knowing that Joel Embiid does slow things down a little bit when he's on the floor?
You know, I don't think it's a cause for concern if Joel is playing at a high level. I mean, you know, because the thing is, you know, you got to go with your strength. So when you look at these teams, the Oklahoma City Thunder, you look at the Indiana Pacers, you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New York Knicks, their best players are perimeter players. So, you know, they're franchise players. So you go with that, right? You know, Karl Anthony Towns is a big who has, like, you know, who could play out in the perimeter. He can do things. You know, the other bigs are kind of sort of like rim protectors who can get up and down. When you have a guy, if Joel is playing at a high level and playing dominant, that's your strength. He's going to back you up and he's going to bang you. He's going to, you know, frustrate you. And also he can get out in space and he can hit threes. So I don't think it's a concern, because you're basically playing to your strength. And that's also what that does is, if you notice how the Knicks were basically getting back into the game against the Pacers, was when they were slowing it down a little bit. The Pacers were getting less chances to get out and run in the open floor. And, you know, so I think that with Joel Embiid being such the guy, and they talk about foul merchants, he's going to foul you out, right? Oh, yeah. So with that being said, no, I don't think that's a problem for them. I think it's predicated on your makeup of the team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And you know, the thing is, to me too, and I know not to state the obvious here, but Joel Embiid has to be healthy, right? We know that going into next year. My biggest thing is, though, he's got to be healthy. He's got to be ready to go in for the kill. He's got to be dominant. He can't be worried about any type of injury nagging him, because if you are going to play around the makeup of your team and you are going to feed Embiid, whether that's on the perimeter or down at the block, whatever that may be, to your best dominant player, he's got to be ready for that and be 100%. And when you look at his track record and you look at his playoffs and the injuries that he's had, it's not too promising, but that's what we're waiting on for coming this year. So we will wait and see. It's been an interesting NBA playoff. Still weird, and I know we're deep in it now, and the Sixers haven't been in the Eastern Conference Finals in a really long time, but it is still weird not seeing the 76ers in the playoffs in the postseason. Their best news from this offseason has been that number 3 pick. But it is coming down to the wire for the NBA playoffs. And right now, Keith, we got 2 front runners. I mean, the Thunder, they're up on the Timberwolves, the Pacers up on the Knicks. You see Minnesota or New York coming back in any of these games, or are you taking Pacers, OKC, NBA Finals?
I'll make you laugh. I have a cousin who lives in Brooklyn. He's a Philly transplant. He's been up there for, I want to say 20-something years. So he texts me after the game Tuesday night, and saying Knicks in 7. Now, before he was saying Knicks in 4, Knicks in 5, Knicks in 6, now Knicks in 7. the dude is hallucinating. Like, you know what I mean? He needs to, like, you know, get some fresh air or something, or leave that latte alone or whatever it is. Nah, they're done. They're cooked. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, I think I shouldn't say done cooked. I think that they're going to win game 6, which is going to be Thursday, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think they lose. I mean, game 5, excuse me. But I think they lose in game 6 in Indiana. I don't see Minnesota coming back. And you know what? Who knows? Minnesota may steal one or whatever, but I don't see it. I just see that, you know, the 2 best teams are showing up and they're seeing it. Like, we could see gentlemen sweeps on both of them, right? Because let's keep it 100. Like, I think OKC lost game 3 because, you know, game 2 was such an emotional roller coaster for them because my man got the award, everything. And like everybody was celebrating. They got Rolexes the day before that. And I think they thought it was going to be sweet. I do. I think they were like, yo, we're the best team. And then they got smacked in the mouth in game 3, but then they came back. I do not see those teams winning. And then here's another thing about the Knicks. Karl Anthony Towns got injured late in that game.
Right.
How is that knee going to hold up? That's a concern to me. So I think
for New York too, my whole thing is, even if for some crazy reason they do come back, they might get swept in the NBA Finals because they are going to be exhausted from fighting back. They're not 100%. You alluded to it with Karl Anthony Towns as well. The Pacers, I don't even want to say they surprised me because, you know, last year they're in the same position. They have an opportunity to go. They get knocked out. But the Pacers really just have come to play. They are in it. I still think that OKC, and I said this earlier in the year, I'm taking them as the NBA champion. Just the way that they've been able to battle. And the thing about OKC is I said, okay, well, they have Hartenstein down low. Chet is a decent player, but I don't know how he'll, you know, do against Jokic and the other big body centers as well. And they've proved that they don't need all of that. They have enough players and enough bench to be able to get just about by anybody. So I'm going to say OKC, Indiana as well, and it will be interesting. But let us know in the comments who you think you will have as your NBA champion. And if the Knicks or possibly the Timberwolves can come back, I think we're both saying we're like in the front runners right now because they have shown in these series that they deserve to be in the NBA Finals. So we will wait and see. But let us know in the comments as well how you're feeling about the 76ers currently. Draft is coming up. We'll see what they do with that number 3 pick and everything in between. Well, thank you guys all so much for tuning in to Locked On 76ers. Thank you so much for making Locked On 76ers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. You have a chance to see every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago saying so long. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in and joining us. And thank you for staying locked on with the 76ers.